Fantastic. All right, well, let's go ahead and welcome everyone. On behalf of the National Child Passenger Safety Board, thank you for joining us for using countermeasures at work to strengthen your CPS program. During this webinar, CPSTs will learn how to employ effective evidence-based tactics to strengthen your CPS program. Today's speaker include the National Child Passenger Safety Board's NHTSA Representative Laura Dunn and NHTSA's Jessica Fry. I'm Mandy Seeteller, the Community Engagement Representative on the National Child Passenger Safety Board and the Statewide CPS Coordinator for the Alaska Highway Safety Office. We have time planned at the end to answer questions. Please use the Q&A box to put in your questions. As a reminder, attendees are requested to not participate in this webinar if you're operating a motor vehicle. It's going to be recorded, so you can listen to the recording when you are safely at your destination. The recording will be posted to carseateducation.org within 1 to 2 business days. For the child passenger safety technicians in attendance, the presentation qualifies for the community education requirement and does not qualify for a CPST CEU. Please join me in welcoming Laura and Jessica. Thank you.
Thank you, Mandy. So my fabulously smart colleague, Jessica Fry, and I are going to be talking about countermeasures at work today. Countermeasures at work, you may or may not be familiar with it. It is a reference guide for science-based highway safety programming. And we want to make sure that the child passenger safety community is familiar with this resource and how you can use it to improve, strengthen your child passenger safety program. So without further ado, Jessica is going to go ahead and take it away.
Awesome, thank you. Hi, everyone. So I'm just gonna get right into these slides. So starting with just the very basics, Countermeasures at Work is a basic reference guide to assist state highway safety offices and other professionals in the space in helping them select effective and evidence-based countermeasures. So we're really trying to get it out to more professionals in the space instead of just state highway safety offices, where the work here today comes in. So the most recently released version of Countermeasures at Work is the 11th edition. So it has a long history. Each revision has included an extensive search of the literature, an evaluation of recent research, and a revision to all the chapters that are included. This time around, we also revised the cover design. So for the past, I think, all 10 editions, it's been a variation on this blue cover, and just the color has changed over the years. So this year with this edition, it's very flashy and brand new. And then we've also used this version for the web version that I'll be demoing later on. So this table provides the effectiveness ratings definitions for each of the star ratings, with a 5-star rating being the highest rating and indicating that its effectiveness has been demonstrated by several high-quality evaluations with consistent results. New to the 11th edition, we're now defining 2-star countermeasures and those that have limited evaluation evidence, but adhere to principles of human behavior and may be effective if implemented well. And 1-star countermeasures that have no evaluation evidence, but also adhere to principles of human behavior and again, may be effective if implemented well. So you can kind of think of the 1- and 2-star countermeasures as ones that may be more like promising practices, or if implemented, should be done with a evaluation component to assess and help understand the effectiveness of the countermeasure, and kind of help us build our growing research database to hopefully move it up a star or 2 in the future editions of countermeasures. So, although we just went over the nice table of star ratings, there are a few caveats I want to mention. First, it's important to note that even the best countermeasure can have little effect if not implemented vigorously publicized extensively, and funded satisfactorily. Effectiveness can vary immensely based on the implementation, and generally the effectiveness ratings that you see next to the countermeasures are the effectiveness you'd expect with the most vigorous implementation of the countermeasure. So even if it's a 5-star countermeasure, if it's not implemented correctly, vigorously, funded satisfactorily, you might see less effectiveness, maybe like 3-star, for example. Finally, effectiveness is primarily based on reductions to crashes and injuries, but crash changes are not used to evaluate the effectiveness of the changes noted in the table next to the countermeasure. That's mostly just because the data that NHTSA uses, the FARS data, is mostly based on those crashes. So that's how we can evaluate our countermeasures. As I mentioned, the countermeasures are reassessed every time we do a new edition of countermeasures. So we look at literature and see new studies come out. We use this for evaluating our countermeasures practice. So we take it.
Can I have you pause for one quick second? I think we're getting some garbled, so we're missing the information you're sharing. Do you maybe want to stop video? That might help improve the quality. I'm sorry.
Sure.
I apologize for interrupting, but we're really excited to hear what you have to say.
No, here we go. Stop video.
Maybe that'll help. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Should I back up any slides, or am I good to continue from here?
I think you're good to go from here, and it sounds better. Thank you.
Oh, okay. So yeah, we use a wide range of studies to figure out the effectiveness, to evaluate the effectiveness of the countermeasures. So countermeasures can be rated as 5 stars even without randomized control trials. And actually, this is often the case. Typically, we don't have randomized control trials to go off of. So you use meta-analyses and systematic reviews first before then considering any other form of high-quality research. Also, some countermeasures effectiveness are covered in more depth just purely due to the availability of published research. So this document is fully based on what is published and already out there. So there might be some delays in the literature. There's a difference in availability of research due to the relative scale of the problem area, the availability of reliable data on the safety problem, and just the general challenge of conducting scientifically valid studies in certain behavioral areas. So nowadays, Countermeasures at Work covers 11 different topic areas. This group is probably most interested in the seatbelts and child restraints chapter, but there can definitely be crossover among the different topic areas. So I just wanted you to have a record of what all is covered. The first version of Countermeasures at Work was published in 2005. And it wasn't until the 4th edition in 2009 that child restraints were added to the seatbelt use chapter. And then as you can see over time, as there is more research available, we have separated out chapters like the alcohol and drug impaired driving chapters and the distracted and drowsy driving chapters. They, had topics added on and then separated. So it's very possible that we could eventually see the same thing with seatbelt and child restraints chapter. We just haven't quite gotten there yet with the literature. So in each chapter of Countermeasures at Work, it's focused on one topic area, or I guess 1 or 2 topic areas. Each chapter starts with a brief introduction to the topic. It provides an overview before discussing the general understanding of the problem, data that's available, emerging issues, and key resources. Following those sections, there's a table of the countermeasures covered for that topic and their ratings. And then each countermeasure itself is discussed in 1 to 2 pages. One important note here is that Countermeasures at Work only has countermeasures that are supported by traditional highway safety grant programs. As such, vehicle and road-based countermeasures are not included. Finally, the 11th edition really improved organization and consistency and introduced the uniform introduction sections that I mentioned on the previous slide. But we also organized the countermeasures in every chapter into the same 4 categories. So for those 4 categories are legislation and licensing, enforcement, other strategies for behavior change, and approaches that are unproven or need further evaluation. Those 1 to 2 stars are promising practices that I mentioned earlier on. Yeah, oh, sorry. And I think that's it for going over countermeasures that work itself. But next, we're going to move into a web demo. Starting with the 10th edition, we created a website to go along with countermeasures. So typically it's a printed book that's 500 pages or a very long PDF document, and it really wasn't quite as user-friendly. So we decided to put it into more of a web format that's easier to navigate, and also has some cool features that I'll get to in just a bit. So even though it's on the web, it's still organized very much the same as the book itself. So you have those same standardized introduction sections and the same categories for the countermeasures. And if you're perhaps not as web savvy, you can always download the full book down at the end of the table of contents. So by bringing countermeasures that work to a web environment, we're able to add new features such as the book builder. And this really gives you an opportunity to create your own customized version of the book. So on the right-hand side of the screen, next to every countermeasures that work page, you'll see the book builder. This is used to add web pages to your own book. Once you click add to my book, the page will be added to the outline below the book builder. So you can see here, like my book now has the alcohol impaired driving page down there. Yep. You can keep adding until you get something like this longer outline. And if at any point you want to remove a page from your book, you can see the red, the red box at the top that says remove from my book. At any point, you can choose to view your book, either by clicking view my book on that book builder that's on the right-hand side of every page, or you can go to your table of contents on the left-hand side and click customize book. Either way, you'll end up looking at this page, which shows your customized book and all your pages that are currently in it. From here, you can choose to either remove pages, reorganize pages, or get the link / share your book to your colleagues. Every time a new page is added, removed, or rearranged, the link to your share my book will be updated. So this just means that you should try and have like a copy of the link, or like save the most up-to-date version of that link, like bookmark it, for example. And then you can always go back to that as long as you have the bookmark. But if you don't have that bookmark, you'd have to start over from the beginning, unfortunately. And that's just because we didn't want to have a login. So there's no real way to save the book to your session. Once you've created your book, if you want to create a different one, for example, feature countermeasures from a different topic or have a focus on like a different population, you can click clear my book, and that'll start you building from scratch once again. On that same page, I mentioned that you can rearrange your book pages. To rearrange the order of the pages in your customized book, you can click on the up and down arrows next to the page. Sorry, click on those up and down arrows. Or you can click and drag the 3 dots on the far right of the page and just move it up and down. Click and hold and move. Here we have an example. We moved the alcohol impaired driving lower BAC limits from the bottom of those drug impaired pages on the left to the bottom of the alcohol impaired driving pages on the right. to keep the sections more consistent with the alcohol impaired driving countermeasures first, and then the drug impaired countermeasures second. So you can do that willy-nilly. As you go through the countermeasures book, as you're adding pages, it really just means that you can add whatever looks interesting and kind of organize it at the end if that's your preference. One of my other favorite features of the eVersion is the enhanced search and filter functions. Above the table of contents on the left-hand side, there is a search bar that you can immediately use for like a keyword search, but you can also click the text underneath. It's pretty tiny, I'm sorry, but you can also, it says you can also sort pages by filters, and that will bring up this page. Typing into the search box will also bring up this page, but the keyword search will already be filled in with whatever you typed. From here, you can use filters or the keyword search. So I'm going to do an example of just using one filter first. So to use the filters, you simply just click on the filter that you wish to use, and it'll be highlighted in gray. So here you can see we clicked on 5-star and it is grayed out. And then you just click apply, and you can see that we have 21 results here that are all 5-star countermeasures. You can also search by using multiple filters. So here we selected 5-star countermeasures and seatbelts and child restraints chapter. And it narrowed down our results from the previous 21 countermeasures to 3 results. So much more. You're drilling down each time to get really the more specific information that you want. Then, as I mentioned, you can also search by keywords. So in this case, we use the word rural. Every page that has a mention of the word rural is brought up in the results. Here we go. And here is an example. Not every countermeasure has a write-up like this, but by using that keyword search, you're able to find some of the sections that do. So for this countermeasure, the communications and outreach strategy for low belt use actually has a whole section dedicated to the rural implications in its write-up. And finally, we can use keyword search and filters together. So combining our previous examples, you could search for rural among 5-star countermeasures, and that narrowed down our 27 results to just 5. And that's it for the demo from me. So now it's on to Laura, I believe.
Thank you. So now we are going to get into talking about, oh, hi. Hello. So now we are going to get into the part talking about this issue area specifically, seatbelts and child restraints. Now, as referenced earlier by Jessica, the beginning of each issue area gives us that background information about each issue area. So in this case, it discusses the effectiveness and use rates for seatbelts and child restraints, discussion about correct use, and it gives a brief discussion of child passenger safety technician training and the certification program. The whole understanding the problem section is really great. It's a really good starting point when you are perhaps writing grant applications, because most of that kind of most relevant research for child passenger safety, that seminal research, is included in that section. So it's really helpful when you're giving background about why child passenger safety is important, things of that nature. For that table setting kind of discussion that you have, that makes up a background section for a lot of those applications. Additionally, that data surveillance section includes information about child restraints that can be gleaned through like the FARS data, for example, by searching, age restraint status, gives technicians a bit of a clearer picture about injuries and fatalities where they're happening in your state. I do want to note that our very smart colleagues at the National Center for Statistics and Analysis produce a huge amount of data and information about traffic safety issue areas, injuries, fatalities. That would be a whole nother webinar, which we would be happy to do sometime if people are interested. But we have some relatively new data dashboards that are really neat, some table tools that are interesting, the STTSI data, if you're not already looking at that. So I really encourage folks to kind of explore what NCSA has to offer in this area. Next would be that emerging issues section. So that really covers a variety of topics that technicians should be aware of. Like, for example, for this specifically, it talks about rideshare concerns, rear seatbelt use, and different sorts of vehicle technology innovation. So I encourage you guys to read that section, check it out. They're relevant for everybody. So next slide, please. Oh, you're already on it. Look at you. So the key resources section is another thing to highlight. It's just a collection of resources that you can use in your programming. Information about different laws by state, and most of you, I'm sure, are aware. You can find those at IIHS or DHSA. Seatbelt, child passenger safety laws by state, and best practice recommendations as well from NHTSA, AAP, different organizations, recommendations and resources from the National Child Passenger Safety Board, some of whom are specific for state child passenger safety coordinators in particular. So that's those are some nice tailored resources for folks to take advantage of. There's also a portal that contains all of the NHTSA Office of Behavioral Safety Research papers. So I encourage folks to go check that out. In recent years, we've had several papers about child passenger safety that were really interesting that came out of Jessica's office. So I encourage you guys to check that out. There are, and of course, you guys know, an oldie but a goodie, a favorite, trafficsafetymarketing.gov, which houses our marketing and educational material for child passenger safety. Next. So let's get into talking about the countermeasures. The countermeasures for this issue area fall into three broad categories. First of which is legislation and licensing, enforcement, and another section called other strategies for behavior change. So next, let's talk about legislation and licensing first. The most effective countermeasures in this section are primary enforcement of seatbelt use laws, strong child passenger safety laws, and increased fines for seatbelt law violations. So the consideration of primary enforcement seatbelt laws are important, even for those folks that specialize in child passenger safety. You know, and I know that adult seatbelt use is linked to use of child restraints. Most child passenger safety laws are primary enforcement. And just additionally, primary seatbelt law that covers all seating positions, especially coverage of that rear seat, can increase seatbelt use and decrease injuries and fatalities. You guys are next. So let's talk about this one, strong child passenger safety laws. So we're so fortunate in this country that every state in the US have passed laws requiring child restraints, but there is room for improvement in many of those states in order to better protect children. So we found that the scope and the wording of laws can really influence restraint use, but a strong law should be comprehensive in covering all seating positions, equipped with a seatbelt in all passenger vehicles, and it also including booster provisions that cover children until they are big enough for the lap and shoulder belt to fit properly, may be advantageous. So when we talk about the use of these, currently 39 states and DC have enacted a child restraint use law that covers children at least through age 7. But you guys know, as I do, that there's a really wide variation in age, height, weight requirements from state to state. It's really a patchwork. So I would encourage you guys to check out the maps that are available at IHS, BHSA, kind of look at all that variability that we have from state to state in those laws. In terms of effectiveness, there are many studies in this section that cover effectiveness. Many studies that also look at the effect of extending that child restraint law to cover older children. Most child passenger safety laws are primary. However, a lot of seatbelt laws start coverage before a child reaches 18. So older children and teens might actually be covered by a secondary enforcement seatbelt law in some states. So primary enforcement means that law enforcement can pull someone over just because they are not wearing their seatbelt. For secondary enforcement, there has to be another violation happening for law enforcement to pull someone over for their seatbelt. So that's the distinction there if you are not aware. So the costs for this are minimal, but they are related to enforcement and publicizing those law changes. If you end up having a law that change, I know that many of you have worked on upgrading your laws over the years and kind of rolling that out. The time to implement this, I mean, technically it can be implemented as soon as that law is enacted and publicized, but we all know how much time it takes behind the scenes to coordinate that kind of work. So let's go to the next slide. All right, so the next countermeasure that we're going to talk about is enforcement. So the countermeasures for enforcement in this area include short-term high visibility seatbelt law enforcement, short-term high visibility child passenger safety law enforcement, nighttime high visibility seatbelt law enforcement, and sustained seatbelt enforcement. So for our purposes in this presentation, we're just going to focus on the high visibility child passenger safety law enforcement. So next slide. So what do we mean by short-term high visibility enforcement? What is that? People may have heard of that acronym HVE, high visibility enforcement. So this consists of a short, typically lasting about 2 weeks, intense, highly publicized period of increased, child passenger safety law enforcement, meaning that you can use checkpoints in states where checkpoints are permitted. Saturation patrols or enforcement zones to do that enforcement. All HVE programs include communications and outreach strategies that use some combination of earned media, meaning like news stories and social media, and paid advertising. So you guys may be most familiar with this concept through the click it or ticket model. Click it or ticket is a high visibility, short-term high visibility model. So in terms of this strategy, there is concern that law enforcement officers are kind of reluctant to enforce child restraint laws due to kind of competing priorities within their departments and a lack of knowledge on the part of the officers on the subject of child restraints. It's something they can be hesitant about. More recent research kind of demonstrates that effective approaches for enforcing child restraint laws, in particular booster seat laws, are possible, but they really do depend on top management support from those agencies and enforcement models that are dedicated to booster seat and other child restraint laws. So in terms of use, there are many states that conduct that short-term high visibility child restraint booster seat law enforcement programs. Many do it in May of each year as part of the national seatbelt mobilizations, and many do it in September as part of National Child Passenger Safety Week. In terms of effectiveness for this countermeasure, there is a systematic review that determined that community-wide information plus enhanced enforcement campaigns were effective in increasing child restraint use, but there are a lot of barriers to this, including low awareness of child passenger safety laws from the community, low risk perception to child passengers, lack of knowledge about the safety benefits among the public, as well as law enforcement officers, and there are more. So I encourage you guys to check out that section. There's a long discussion there about effectiveness. So the cost for HVE is expensive. That's kind of an additional barrier. It requires intensive time from state highway safety offices, time from law enforcement, actually implementing that enforcement, and the communications staff, whoever's doing communications as part of it. You know, paid advertising really does increase effectiveness for this, but it can be expensive depending on what it is. So these kind of mobilizations take about 4 to 6 months to plan and implement. So next, thank you. So this is the section that we are going to spend the most time in. And this is the countermeasure called Other Strategies for Behavior Change. So the countermeasures here are communication strategies for low seatbelt use groups as part of HVE, employer-based programs, programs for older children, programs for increasing child restraint and booster seat use, and child restraint inspection stations. Yay! Next slide. So, programs for older children. What are we talking about here? I'm only going to focus on the countermeasures that are most specific to child restraint, so I'm going to skip those first two. So, programs focusing on older children, teens and tweens, is what we're talking about when we talk about programs for older children. So that 2021 National Survey of Use of Booster Seats, or NSUBS, found that about 13.2% of children 8 to 12 were unrestrained. And this is a slight increase from 2019. So restraint use certainly has increased over time. The trend is positive there. Unrestrained children do continue to be a concern in this age group. So in 2021, about 36% of fatally injured children between the ages of 8 to 12 and 59% of children ages 13 to 14 were unrestrained. So this is a group that requires some attention for sure. In terms of use, the consensus is that these programs are fairly common, but not really discussed much in the literature. We don't have a lot of information. There is one extensive resource available, and the report is titled Increasing Seatbelt Use Among 8 to 15-year-olds, and there's a volume 1 and 2. So I encourage you to go to that use section and or the reference section and find that. It's from 2008, and it is a very extensive resource that talks about programming for children this age. In terms of effectiveness, there's a lot of variability. The results are generally encouraging, but as everything, as a lot of tailored program implementations do, it's really based on the program and that population-specific program examples, how those are really working in communities. So a few examples of these programs by name. So specifically for tweens, one is called Avoiding Teen Tragedy, and that's out of Pennsylvania. Another is called the Automotive Coalition for Traffic Safety. Another one is called Make It Click, and this is from Virginia. So those are kind of more geared toward tweens. There's a few that are specific to teens. Just Get It Across is an Ohio-based program. There was a teen seatbelt demonstration in Colorado and Nevada that we published. And another program, which you guys may be familiar with, called the SAFE program. Seatbelts are for everyone, and that's out of Kansas. So again, you can find information about those specific programs, where to find those in the references and in this effectiveness section. And like I said earlier, the cost and time for these programs are really dependent on how they're tailored, how long they are, what population they're for. There's a lot of variability there. Let's go to the next slide. So let's talk about programs for increasing child restraint and booster seat use. I kind of think about this section as like a potpourri for this issue area, because there are so many creative programs happening in this area, and many of which don't make it to the literature, but we know that word of mouth and different folks talk about what they're doing, and it's exciting that there's a lot of possibilities in this area. So there's abundant research, we all know, that has shown that correctly using appropriate child restraint or seatbelt is that single most effective way to save lives and reduce injuries for children. However, those unrestrained children are still overrepresented in motor vehicle fatalities. So as the countermeasure before, these programs are common. Many of you are doing them. And there just isn't an overall summary for this, research-based document of everything that there is. So in terms of effectiveness, it's important to talk about, strategies that make some of these programs effective. So programs that aim to increase knowledge or affect some of that self-reported behavior have shown some success, but many times child restraint use is often not measured. So it's kind of difficult to determine whether these programs end up increasing child restraint use. There are several studies that have demonstrated success increasing observed restraint use, which is great. One study used an approach with a research-based video that shared personal stories of a child's injury and how that injury could have been prevented with a booster seat. Additionally, the program included educational sessions and a distribution of booster seats to families in need, and a significant increase in booster seat use was seen in that intervention community. Another study to talk about, which some of you may be familiar with, is the Strike Out Child Passenger Injury Program. So this was for 4 to 7-year-olds. This took place in 20 rural communities in 4 different states. And information was shared in conjunction with T-ball season. They decided to integrate this program into something already existing in the community. So they met with a child passenger safety technician during the T-ball event. Child restraints and booster seats were provided, and restraint use increased in those communities. And, this study kind of demonstrated that, tailoring a program to fit in an established community event, can have a lot of short-term impact on restraint use in those rural communities where resources can only. So there are other programs discussed in that effectiveness section also. I just thought you guys might enjoy some specific examples of what those are. The cost, as before, is just very dependent on your program components, your delivery, how many people you're trying to reach, things of that nature. But for most of these types of programs, it usually takes about 4 to 6 months to kind of plan and implement that. So let's go to the next one. A favorite to us all, the child restraint inspection station. So, it's important to make sure that restraints are installed correctly. We all know that. Certainly we have high rates of misuse at times. Our official number from the agency is about 46% based on NCREST, but I know that misuse rates vary widely throughout the country and in different communities. So premature transition, as you all know, is a significant issue, as well as booster non-use. People don't understand why they should have a booster, so they kind of just skip that step. And having, that properly staffed inspection station with current technicians in some underserved locations is really important to maintaining the effectiveness of this countermeasure kind of overall. So in addition to having technicians and inspection stations available in communities, it's important that the community is aware of this resource and to make sure that we're doing proper outreach for folks. Given that some of the other research has shown that caregivers to be pretty overconfident in their abilities to correctly install and use child restraints, this, suggests a need to conduct better outreach to caregivers who aren't really actively seeking out assistance from CPS technicians. So luckily, in the age that we live in right now, we have a lot of tools that are available to us to reach people that are free, social media and lots of online ways that you can try to reach people as well. And so I know child passenger safety technicians are so creative in how they're trying to bring that information to the community. So in terms of use, we know that there are child restraint inspection stations in every state, and they're common components of state and local CPS programs and tied to highway safety funding, certainly. So as of 2021, there's about 5,000 inspection stations registered with NHTSA. This kind of ebbs and flows. And, if you have changes to your inspection stations, you've closed one, you've opened a new one, please reach out to your regional program manager in your NHTSA regional office, and we can get that updated for you so it is accurate. In terms of effectiveness, there are several studies about inspection stations in general and how effective they are. So one study found that it was a Safe Kids Worldwide sponsored inspection station. You know, they held events at car dealerships, hospitals, retail outlets, and several other community locations. It did positively change parents' behavior. It increased their knowledge over a 6-week follow-up period. And children arriving at the second event were restrained more safely and more appropriately than they were when they were first seen. There's also a pretty lengthy discussion about the merits of hands-on education and its effectiveness. In one of those studies, a parent who received a hands-on demonstration were also required to demonstrate in return that they could correctly install that restraint. So those follow-up observations found that the intervention group was about 4 times more likely to use their child restraints as was the control group. So it's very interesting. That's a really cool section. I encourage you guys to go check it out. Another study, this is a study from the United States, found that parents and caregivers who were initially taught how to install a child restraint by a CPS technician were more likely to achieve an accurate installation than those who initially learned from other sources. You know, typically the manual or another resource. So very cool. Cost. We all know that the cost really depends on the size of the audience and, you know, the components of the program, the services offered. Distribution of seats is very likely a part of this program for almost all of you. So permanent inspection stations listed on the locator. You have to have a currently certified CPST on site during those posted hours. And so the cost to kind of maintain those are, you know, includes the personnel costs, you're paying that person, operational expenses, supplies, seats, things of that nature. Hopefully, you can partner with someone that lets you use their facility free of charge. You know, many of us use fire stations or things like that. So that is all kind of part of that consideration for cost. And in terms of time, although it feels like when you work these consistently, you're always there. But it takes several months to kind of plan and implement like how you're going to do this and kind of roll it out and make sure that people are aware of it. But it is something that is supported as a significant, it's a good countermeasure in terms of countermeasures that work. So this kind of concludes the specific child passenger safety discussion for countermeasures. So I think at this point, we are happy to take any questions that folks might have or have any kind of discussion if people want to posit, you know, some discussion items in the chat.
Thanks, Laura. So we're actually going to use the Q&A option at the bottom of your screen. You can just pop on there and enter your questions. But we would love to hear from you. I'm personally a little bit interested in how that T-ball program worked. That sounds really fun, and what a great audience.
Very cool. It's very cool. And the reference for that will take you to the whole paper. So you can find out all about it.
Thank you. And Jessica, the digital book, wow, that is going to be so incredibly useful because like you said, it's about this thick. And so being able to create that. So this recording will be live so we can go back. Yes. I think we all have a few of those running around our offices too, right? So we can go back and reference what we were looking for. So I'm really excited about that. Building my own book with what's aware. So we do have a question from Colleen. She said, I'm sure you are not aware, but getting the NHTSA listing update changed is nearly impossible. The listings are outdated, at least in my area. You know, Colleen, I got to be honest with you. I had a very, very different experience with Lynn from Region 10. I sent her a spreadsheet of my fitting stations and she was super helpful. So maybe we can connect you with your region contact. If you can let us know where you're at, we'll get you in touch and we'll get that updated for you.
Yeah, Amanda and I can reach out to you and make sure that you have what you need.
Perfect. Yeah, I personally hadn't realized my state hadn't been updated for a while. I clicked on that. I'm like, hey, where's our office? We want to, share our fitting stations and
Yeah.
make sure it aligned in our strategic highway safety plan. So it was a great
Well, and
opportunity.
sometimes too, folks think about it like closer to CPS week, which is great. I mean, that's when folks have more things going on sometimes and events that are just for CPS week. But yeah, please send those along anytime you have them.
Thanks. Colleen, I grabbed your information out of the Q&A. I'm going to send that to Laura and Jessica so that they can get you some information. I'm sure they'd be happy to help. And there's her email as well. Laura, if someone needed to find their region person to do these updates, how do they go about doing that?
Oh, well, I can drop a link in the chat here that talks about the different regional offices. So that might be cool. Amanda, do you want to add anything? I know you're with us, our friend who is an RPM. Hello.
Good afternoon, everyone. If you're interested, every NHTSA region that Laura is including in the chat has a child passenger safety regional program manager that helps the states. So if you have not met your CPS regional program manager, please reach out to Laura and and we can definitely help make that connection for you, especially if you're a state coordinator and you have questions about programming or resources or things you all can do in your states.
If it looks like Jean is also looking for their representative in Rochester, New York. So Laura, if you'll post that, I think you said you're going to post that in the chat. And we'll get you all connected. Jessica, would you mind sharing again? So you said that if we create a book, an electronic book, we need to save the link so we can go back to get it. And that was to avoid, so we don't have to have logins and passwords and all that other stuff, right? But you said that we just need to save our link. We can copy and paste it in our notes section or something.
Yeah, I recommend just bookmarking it.
Perfect.
Just like any bookmark for any website. And that's how when you click on share your book, it like has it's very similar to like when you're sharing like a Google document or like a Teams document. It has a link to a web page. That is send you to the web page that's your customized book. So then as long as you have that open, hit the star to like bookmark it. That'll bring you back to that specific version of the book every single time.
Very nice. I think that's going to be really helpful. We're all headed into our grant writing season. We're going to need to access those and make sure that we're on top of it. We covered a lot of information. Does anybody have any other questions? And even if it's a little bit outside of this, I'll bet our NHTSA friends would be happy to help us navigate those questions.
Well, and just to add, I guess, as part of this discussion, like we know that people are doing a lot of really cool, creative things in terms of traffic safety. And, this is meant as a reference guide and helps people find things that are evidence-based and, that you might want to incorporate into what you're doing. And if you are doing something really cool, it would be great if it was in the literature, right? So if an academic, person had an interest in what you were doing and wanted to write a paper, or, perhaps we can, if you want to contact your regional office, they may be able to connect with us and we could talk about, should we evaluate this nationally? So thank you guys for all the hard work that you do every day to keep kids and families safe. And, this is just another tool for you in your toolkit in order to keep doing that good work.
Thank you, Laura. Jean, I see that you probably need some additional help. If you'll include your email and or phone number, I'll pass it along to Laura and Jessica and they can help you out. All right, well, I'll let you think on that for a few minutes. I'm going to share a couple of our last slides with a few little things we want to chat about. So let me share my screen and always takes a minute to navigate this, doesn't it? We will remain on the webinar for just a few more minutes after if you have additional questions. So we hope that you're enjoying our webinar series. We're sure enjoying delivering them. In March, there's going to be a CEU webinar, Car Seat Detective, Compliant, Non-Compliant, or Counterfeit. I think it's going to be a really interesting discussion, and registration for that will open up next week. Visit cpsboard.org/webinars or scan the QR code on your screen. And it's a secret. Dr. Marilyn Bull is going to be retiring from the CPS board, not from her work, this spring. To thank her for all of her contributions, we are creating a kudo board where you can share a photo, a story, a thank you message. It's open to everyone in the entire nation and would really like to celebrate her massive contributions to child passenger safety. You can click on this QR code, just take a snapshot of it. It'll take you right to the kudo board. Feel free to share it with anyone in your state. But again, we want to thank her for her contributions. So please share and please take a moment to send her a note. So as a reminder, this webinar will be posted in 1 to 2 days at carseateducation.org. We are incredibly happy that you joined us today. Thank you. And we'll stay on for another couple of minutes in case you have any questions you'd like to share with us, but we can go ahead and stop the recording. Jessica and Laura, thank you so much for your information today. You know, I think it's going to change the way that we do our programs, and I love the new cover. It's pretty exciting to see all the changes and the technical updates you guys are doing. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you for having us.